Hello everyone, this is Sergeant Sherrill and I'm going to be conducting your SIBx Hub training. My contact information is listed above. To optimize the training you're about to receive, please open your SIBx Hub in your internet browser. We will work how to create a transaction together in this training video. You can press pause now to open the transaction so we can work one together on how to create. Understanding the Hub menu. The Hub menu is as listed above. You will see different items, such as your queues. Your queues are items that you've created, items you're actioning, items you're tracking, all open items, and all closed items. You'll also see the queues for locations. This is the level location in which a SIBx Hub request can reside at. Depending on your level of access, you'll be able to see your service members in each of these locations. How to create a SIBx Hub transaction. Click on Create New Item at this time to create a new SIBx transaction. This box will appear. The description box is very important in creating your SIBx Hub transaction. For this exercise, you may put last, first, and the last four. For example, my friend Joe, 1, 2, 3, 4. Please put test after your description, as this is a test item and we don't want to confuse it with anything else. Now, if this was a request for filled transaction, I want you to know that there's a specific naming convention that we need to use. Units are being asked right now to use the 5-digit UIC, paragraph, / line, and then the duty position, 42 Alpha to Oscar. Quick reference on the Oscar and the 0. Please be sure you put in Oscar and not the number 0 here. The next position that we're going to talk about is the action type. Before we move on, one more item. Just make sure, again, your duty MOS for requests for fills, that naming convention, 5-digit UIC, 10502, 42 Alpha 2 Oscar, paragraph line, duty position. Action types and sub-actions. SIBx Hub is set up to automatically pull sub-actions depending on what type of action that you decide that you need. So if you're doing an ETS packet for EPM and you select EPM, the sub-action is going to auto-generate to a specific list in the sub-action field that corresponds with the action type. The same if I was to select PSB, it would populate in the sub-action anything that PSB handles at the G1 level. So for this transaction, you can select EPM and you can select ETS. The owning location. Here in the owning location, you're going to see company, troop, and battery. This needs to be the location you want the SIBx Hub transaction sent back to once it's complete. This is typically the person who's generating the transaction. It'll be your location. So here we have the action type, G1 EPM, the sub-action, loss ETS. We ask that you keep all suspense states empty. You choose your owning location, and the next thing we're going to talk about is our starting location. The starting location needs to be the next level of action that needs to take place. So if you're at the company level, the next level would be the battalion S1. Now, a couple of things happen when you choose company, troop, battery, and we talk about the owning unit. When I select my owning unit, for example, TMBFO Company F, when I select Battalion S1, the starting unit will automatically autofill to the battalion level. So again, the best way, let me go back, I'm sorry. The best way to filter through this and do your transaction is to do owning location, then choose your unit, and then choose your starting location and let the starting unit auto-populate. So this is what your transaction will look like now that it's complete. Now if your starting unit is an MSC, select MSC for the starting location. And if your starting unit is a company, troop, or battery, select the corresponding UIC for that specific battery. The next section we're going to talk about is your comment section. Now, there's 3 items here we're going to go through. The set default owner. So usually when you're creating transactions, these things are going to remain the same. You'll always have a starting location and the next level. So if you know that this is not going to change, you can actually select set default owner, and this is going to make it so every time you create a SIBx transaction, it will auto-populate in this area, and you won't have to continue to keep clicking the owning location, starting location, owning unit, starting unit. Comments are very important. Please be sure to annotate comments in the comment section for what you're doing. So in this example, we're doing an ETS packet on, and then we would put last verse and the last 4. Then you'll select next once you have done this part of the request. Now we're going to add a service member to the transaction. This is what your next screen looks like. All you're going to do is type in your soldier's name, select next, and once you do that, you will see that your friend Joe will populate under the service member tab at the bottom of this page. If that's correct, you can select next to go to the next screen. Now we're going to attach a file to the transaction. Here you can click and drag your file into the upload. Once you drag it, you'll see it populate with a little green saying that it is uploading into the transaction. Select finish, and you will notice that this is your finishing block. The document will successfully load, and you'll see it here in the current document section. Then you may select finish to go to the next screen. Now you'll notice that the transaction has disappeared, and you need to locate the packet you just created. To do so, you will select items that you've created. This will bring you to a queue of items that you have personally created in the SIBx Hub. Here you'll see all the items you've created, and you'll see the one that you did, submitted new, or you can search it by description to find the one that you just did. You may select the item ID number. We're going to talk about a few different things in this transaction. First thing we're going to talk about is transaction data. That's this section right here. This is pulled in by the transaction information that you put in when you created a new item. This section lets you view data at any point in time. The next thing that we're going to talk about is workflow. After workflow, we're going to talk about comments, and then we're going to talk about the queues and how they take place. Workflow is automatically set up based off your requesting location, your requesting unit, your action type, your owning unit, and your starting unit. Each level will be responsible Give me just a second. Each level will be responsible for marking the section complete after adding comments to the transaction. So, for example, when battalion gets done doing their level, they will mark battalion brigade S1 as completed. When MSC has done their spot, they would mark MSC completed, so on and so forth until the transaction is complete. Comments. Each level will be responsible for adding comments for the transaction. You must select Post New Comment for the comment to post in the comment section of the SIBx Hub item. So I would type in my comment here, click Post New Item, or Post New Comment, and then you would see here where my comments have published in the transaction. Current queue. All right, current queues is a big slide, so I want to walk through this slowly. So once the Brigade S1 has clicked Mark Brigade S1 as completed, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to see this note here, completed by the person that was completed by, and then here, if you follow this over, automatically that current queue is going to change. And it's going to change to this next level right here. So after the brigade marks theirs complete, it automatically goes to the MSC level. So you see here that it automatically populated to the MSC at the 155th. The next thing that it does that you need to know that you need to do is that you have to mark submit changes. When you select submit changes, that is when it moves to the current queue. So even though you've put your comments and you selected completed, until you choose submit changes, this will not move to the next level. Now here you notice that we went battalion to brigade, brigade to MSC. So it goes straight to the MSC queue. This is going to talk about our current queue and workflow. We talked about a little bit ago completing each section as you receive the transaction. And when you do that, how it updates this area right over here. The next section we're going to talk about is the files. When you select set retention on a file, there's two things that allows you to do. A transaction cannot be marked complete unless a retention status is placed on the file that is uploaded. So click set retention and a pop-up box will appear that looks like this. If there is no retention needed, meaning the document does not need to be iPermed or the document has already been iPermed, you can select set as no retention needed. This will allow the person who is completing the transaction to complete the transaction without selecting a retention status. If a retention status is not set, meaning no retention needed or being retained, then the person completing the transaction either can select no retention needed or send it back to the corresponding level and let the level complete the transaction out. Here you'll see set as no retention needed. When this is selected, you'll be able to go to available actions and set the owner as completed. You can replace any document by selecting replace on the file. This is a great tool if you would like to add documents to an existing packet and then replace the old packet with a new. So if I was at the MSC level and I had a ETS packet and I wanted to add a memo from our commander saying that we approved the ETS, I could replace the packet, open the packet, add my document, and then select replace, and then drag my file here to replace it. You'll also be able to see historical versions so you never lose what was initially updated or uploaded. Now, available actions cannot be marked owner as completed until a retention status is set for the document attached. Once the action is marked owner as completed, you can send back to correct level. For example, EPM will mark no retention needed once all approved separations had been iPermed, then send back to MSCQ with the available action marked as complete. If items are returned for any reason, the available actions will allow the user to see the select the correct reasoning. For example, instead of completed, it might be 25% complete, it might be rejected, it might be pending an update. At any level, you can return back to the last location for any action listed in the available actions drop-down menu. It's also important to put good comments in the transaction so that the unit opening the transaction can see what they need to correct. Now, if you're doing a transfer to a different MSC, you can see here how to move from one MSC to the other. So if the troop command has a transfer request that they need the 184th commander to approve off on, here you can see the current queue, MSC S1, troop command, they can actually send it to the 184th by them selecting MSC S1 for commander approval. If it's a specific unit, they can actually drop this down to company level and choose the UIC that it corresponds with the soldier who's requesting transfer. Once you do that, make sure to submit changes so that it goes to the current unit or MSC selected in their queue so they can open the transaction. The next thing we're going to talk about is adding service members. Over on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see service members. Please note that this is not a place where you CC people in order for them to see this transaction. The service members and adding service members specifically ties the service member to the transaction. So for example, we're doing an ETS packet on my friend Joe. Well, me adding my friend Joe to this transaction will allow me to select his name in the future to see any data I need to in the SIBx hub. You select the service member's name to pull up the service member's soldier profile. Here is the soldier's profile. If you select historical over in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll be able to see a couple of things. You'll be able to see the SIBx hub items and all the items that correspond with this soldier. There's a drop-down menu, so make sure you click SIBx hub items in the historical reports to see all requests. Then you can action any request or see where a request is based off of the item ID. In order for the service member to remain tied to the SIBx hub transaction, you must leave the service member attached to the request. Only delete the service member from the transaction when the transaction no longer pertains to that specified soldier. An example of this would be requests for fills. To delete the service member from the transaction, just click that little trash can. If you want to track an item, so let's say that we want to track this specific ETS packet. Before we close out the transaction, you can select track this item. And anything that happens, you'll be able to go to your main hub menu where items you track and see this request. To untrack it, just click Stop Tracking This. Right here, you can see where it says items you're tracking. When you select Track This Item, this is where that item appears. The next thing we're going to talk about is managing notifications. Select Manage Notifications and you'll see a pop-up box appear that allows you to add a notification for you to manage. For example, if you were the S1 and you wanted to track all requests for fills that arrive at EPM, you can say that you want any EPM transaction that is a request for fill when it arrives at a certain level, in this case EPM, and you can set an expiration date on that transaction. When you select Add Notification, it'll populate in your current notifications. So anytime that you see a request for fill, it'll populate. In this case, you can see that the subaction is AWOLs. So anything that arrives at EPM in the EPM queue that is an AWOL will also populate to show notification. You can add as many notifications as you would like. To delete a notification, just select that little trash can. Overhead units. Overhead units need to be selected by using the drop-down menu under Company, Troop, Battery, and then Current Unit. Select the UIC that corresponds with the overhead UIC. Item history. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see item history. If you click View History, you'll be able to see the different levels and where the item has been and who has actioned it. How to find a transaction. So as you're submitting transactions in the SIBx Hub, there's different ways that you can track it. One of them is through the SIBx Hub History, where you click on the soldier's name, historical, and you drop down to the SIBx Hub transactions tied to the soldier. We went over that a few seconds ago. The second way you can do it, which we also went over, is tracking certain items that you're actioning. The next way you can do it is you will be able to see soldiers at whatever level it is, and this is how you would track that. For example, if I was going to track items in the G1, I would select G1 and then select, for example, EPM. Or if I'm at the MSC level or brigade level or battalion level and I wanted to see actions that are in the company troop battery level, I would be able to select it to see soldier transactions or how many exist in there, or be able to filter for a soldier's name. So what that looks like is when you select either Battalion S1 or EPM, a menu will populate with this dark blue line. You can filter any blue column title header to search for your transaction. So if I select Battalion S1 and I knew the item document number, I could select item document number and filter for that specific number. You can also do that by description, looking at name. You can do that by current status for submitted new or pending retention, or you can do it by sub-action. So if I only wanted to see AWOLs or ETSs, I can do that here in these levels. Now, if something is in the company troop level, you won't be able to see it in the Battalion S1 level. And what I mean by that is each level has different transactions. Battalion can see company, brigade can see battalion and company. But if a company creates the transaction and it's at the battalion level, they're not going to be able to select company troop and find their transaction. They're going to have to select battalion to see where it is, or brigade, or MSC, or up at the EPM level where they select the corresponding location. This concludes the SIBx Hub training. Please mark your request, if you created one, to go through this training with me as complete. Please remove the service member's name from the service members section at the bottom right-hand corner of the transaction, and then select Submit Changes. If you have any questions regarding the SIBx Hub training, please feel free to call me, 601-313-6223. Thank you for attending the SIBx Hub training.